G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with part 2 of The Outsiders, followed by First Dog on the Moon.
Miriam, I cut you off appallingly there.
No, not at all. I was just thinking about what Graham said, and I've been obsessed about this idea obsessed with this idea for a little while, which is that the wars of religion in Europe were deadly. I mean, there were parts of Germany and parts of the Czech lands where half the population was killed. And I think the average in Germany was a third. And I just keep thinking, it came to a point where it just could not go on. And Europeans had to work out a solution. And that was the beginning of the slow crawl towards enlightenment, secularization, tolerance. The secular state is not an atheist state, which everyone seems to be saying these days. It is a state where your religion is a private thing. And they slowly work their way through it. And I keep thinking, the Middle East and Muslim societies and the Sunni and the Shia would probably end up coming to the same things themselves if it weren't for the fact that the Europeans have been so constantly meddling in those regions that it doesn't just become an internal thing of how are we going to work out this religious difference. It gets co-opted into nationalist ideologies and anti-Western ideologies. And much as I find that horrifying, you can see a grain of, reason behind it.
I'm not so sure that that's right, Miriam. Certainly in Islam, the great division is between Sunnis and Shiites, and that goes back almost to the beginning of the Islamic religion, the Muslim religion. It's got nothing to do with the West at all. An interesting thing about ISIL and the Islamic State, or whatever you wish to call it, is that they have often said they see the main enemy as other Muslims, Shiite Muslims. In fact, why they were, either left or were thrown out, depending on who you believe, of Al-Qaeda was because that's what they stressed. Not that the prime enemy was the West, it was other factions of Islam. And Al-Qaeda has always said that, no, the enemy is the West, although at first they defined it as Britain and America came later. And you could paper over the divisions within Islam. I can't buy the idea that the divisions within Islam have anything to do with the West. That just doesn't fit with the
In the meantime, Glenn, we have, domestically, here and now, we have this situation being used to change a lot of legislation, change a lot of structures around freedoms that we hold fairly dear.
Yes.
Has that happened too quickly without sufficient discussion? I wouldn't comment on whether it's too quick or not. At the moment, from what I know out in the media, because I'm not privy to any specific information that people don't know in general. So based on what I know, I think more security is essential, but at what cost? So
the difficult balance.
Difficult balance. Now, in terms of legislation that's coming out, to me, a good way to balance it is if there is a security issue now, can we put some sunset clauses on a lot of legislation that's coming out? So then that way we know that we're using that law today to provide security, but then, we won't be using it open-endedly down the track for something else. And the paradox, Miriam, in this, the sort of the bipartisanship, which we would hope in seriousness is attracted to an issue, also sort of deprives us of the necessary debate around that issue.
Well, I think the problem is that there is no calm debate about anything just at the moment. It's all, in the political sphere, it's all rhetoric, it's all adversarial, and for all that, the opposition gets behind the government in times like this, they're either papering over the debate we should have, or they're just kind of going along with it. I don't know what they're doing. But we're not having the serious debate we have to have about a whole raft of things. About the changes to legislation, about the commitment of troops, about everything. We need to be talking about this openly and not in party political terms, let alone, God help us, in civilizational, conflict terms.
Perhaps radio is the place for it. And look, thanks to our outsiders this morning for doing their bit. They've been journalist Miriam Cossack, lawyer and Army officer Glenn Mohammed, and journalist Derek Parker. It's coming up to 4 minutes away from 10.
Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist for The Guardian, First Dog on the Moon. Now, this week, the government passed legislation that could result in journalists or whistleblowers being sent to jail for 10 years for reporting on something called special intelligence operations. What is a special intelligence operation? It's whatever the Attorney General says it is. The legislation was passed with the wheedling assistance of federal opposition leader Bum Shoveling and the pusillanimous Labor Party. Let me explain. Your government has enacted laws which will allow ASIO to snoop on any computer or device connected to the entire internet at any time with only a single warrant. And not only that, once they access your device, they can change, remove or add data without any independent oversight. They can add data. They can put whatever they like on your computer, and as long as nobody dies or gets blown up, they're protected from any legal liability. And if you find out, you're not allowed to say anything.
Excuse me, Mr. On the Moon. Sorry, yeah, there's some people here to see you.
What? You can't come in here. This is live radio.
Actually, Mr. On the Moon, yes, we can. It is Mr. On the Moon, is it not?
Well, that depends.
Mr. On the Moon, we've discovered some rather interesting information on your smart telephone. Can you explain what this is?
Well, I've never seen that before. I've never even been to Syria. And I certainly don't watch The Bachelor. I don't know how to make a croquembouche. That's been photoshopped.
That's what they all say. Put him in the van.
Well, you can't do this. There's no I in Team Australia, except for the one at the end, obviously. Somebody call Mark Scott. Help! Help!
That's the last we saw of it. More First Dog on the Moon for you next week, and that ends our program, Sunday Extra today. Don't forget, if you've missed anything on today's show.
Well, there you go. Tony Abbott doing everything he can to instill a feeling of fear in the Australian population. And I get to claim the homecoming of a prophecy. On the 18th of September, I posted a movie titled QED, How to Home Grow a Terrorist, Cancel Their Passport. On the 23rd of September, an 18-year-old Melbourne bloke, Abdul Newman Haider, whose passport was cancelled a few months ago, went fizz-bang-pop after festering in the suburbs and being surveilled by ASIO, exactly as I had predicted. So I'm feeling just a little bit clever, actually, kinda, sort of. I was not wrong. I'm probably not going to be wrong when I suggest that neo-fascists or proto-fascists, like the apparent government of the Islamic State of Levant, they tend to make the same sort of mistakes. Because they've got a bigger gun than they've ever had before, or a bigger army, or a bigger air force, or a bigger navy, whatever it is, they feel so suddenly relatively empowered that they cannot imagine anybody standing up to them on the field of conflict. So, for example, both the German military forces and the Japanese military forces during the 1930s developed elite corps of really highly skilled, highly trained experts, and they initially sent those elite, highly trained experts with a technological advantage, and they sent them out against people who were disorganized and badly armed and poorly led. And they took an excessive amount of self-satisfaction from their early successes. So you get the Germans assisting Franco in the Spanish Civil War. You get the Japanese cutting a swathe of destruction through China and Korea. But as time goes on and as more forces array themselves against the expanding fascist regime, not only do the experts start to drop dead from sheer attrition as well as combat fatigue, the equipment that led to the early successes rapidly becomes obsolete, and the extended supply lines created by the initial successes mean that it's got an extremely limited future. The other thing is that people once said that if Adolf Hitler had had access to modern telecommunications, and this was said during the 1980s or 90s, if Hitler had had 1990 vintage communications so that he could have really been in command of frontline units, he would have lost World War II in about 1942 because he was such an incompetent half-wit. Well, at the moment, the ideological leaders have got modern communications, and they'll probably expand and then internally disorganise and decay faster than Germany's Third Reich did, you know, the 1,000-year Reich that lasted for about 12 years. So I would have to speak on the side of moderation and say the cleverest thing that the West can possibly do is sit back and stop trading with ISIL. Somewhere between $2 and $4 million per day worth of oil is being purchased from ISIL, extracted from the refineries and the oil infrastructure that they've already captured. If nobody bought their oil, as well as nobody trading with them, they'd very rapidly run out of the ability to continue to field an army, because armies are pretty expensive. Even if they're ragtag rebels, driving captured American equipment donated to the now defunct Iraqi army. Well, apparently, America is spending $15 million a day bombing the billions of dollars worth of equipment that they gave to Iraq. One wonders whether this is a deliberate contrivance so that the American military industrial complex can continue to award new contracts to restock and resupply the ammunition being expended against sand dunes with Humvees on them in the middle of what used to be Iraq. And that brings me to another point. I don't understand why people insist on pretending that the Islamic State of Levant is not a state. It's a political organisation. It's a bunch of hardline authoritarian fascists who honestly believe that their God theory is so powerless and so weak that Allah requires them to pick up a gun and defend the mosque because Allah is not capable of defending the mosque. And Tony Abbott, the seminarian Catholic wannabe priest, just like Stalin was a seminarian wannabe priest. Tony Abbott has such great deep faith in his God theory that he is not remotely prepared to sit on his hands and let the creator of the universe deal with a bunch of violent individuals who can't find the strength of personal moral courage within themselves to obey the commandment, thou shalt not kill. There's no point saying that, oh, well, you know, God kills. Look, you know, like how many people get killed in floods and fires and volcanoes. So God kills, therefore people are allowed to kill. I'm pretty sure somewhere there's a comment that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So unless you think you are God, you have no right to behave like God. Thou shalt not kill, whether you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Jain, a Zoroastrian, a Farsi, a Buddhist, a Confucian, a Bushidist. Nobody has the right to kill other people. To declare that you're going to go and smite the forces of evil. Evil is live, said backwards. The opposite of live or live, alive, is dead. So you're going to go out and fight the forces of death. That's apparently Tony Abbott's plan. And in doing that, he's going to alienate the entire Islamic diaspora, particularly the angry young adolescents. It's enough to give diarrhea the shits. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. Approaching the upload limit. Ciao.